Ethiopia's parliament has voted today to end a 6-month state of emergency that was declared back in November, actually 3 months. Changing security conditions was cited as the reason behind the decision to lift the state of emergency. We get an update for you. We're joined by William Davison, senior Ethiopia analyst at the International Crisis Group. Thank you very much for availing yourself this afternoon. So what do we need to understand about how lawmakers voted and some of the reasons behind this?
I think the main reason is that when the state of emergency was implemented in early November, there was a genuine threat from the armed opposition. They were marching towards the capital, particularly the forces from Tigray region, with the support of the Oromo Liberation Army from Oromia region. But that threat has receded. The Tigray forces retreated back to Tigray. They were essentially trying to overthrow Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's government, but that's not an immediate prospect, and I think that explains Parliament's decision, which was preceded by a cabinet decision to remove the state of emergency.
And what do we know about tensions between the TPLF and the government of Ethiopia?
Well, we know that there has been a reduction in large-scale fighting since that withdrawal. The federal government sort of made the decision not to fully re-enter Tigray to try and completely defeat the TPLF or the Tigray forces. There's been plenty of sort of diplomatic activity, prisoner releases, which are positive signs, but essentially the major problems that took the parties to war there is no signs of them being resolved. So yes, there was a lull in the fighting, but it would not be a surprise if the fighting resumed for real as well.
And on that, right, so the state of emergency that was declared back in November was supposed to last for 6 months, and 3 months in, it has been lifted. But as you indicate that there's no, possibility or real possibility that tensions on the ground will cease, what is it that we do know about the situation on the ground? What are you hearing, at least?
Well, I mean, as I said, there has been a reduction in large-scale fighting. Generally, there has been some very serious fighting to the east of Tigray in Afar region, both sides blaming each other, but essentially it led to some sort of incursion by the Tigray forces into that region. There's also a continued humanitarian blockade on Tigray. The region remains almost completely isolated, creating a very serious humanitarian situation. And then this territorial issue in the west, where Tigray lost territory to Amhara region at the outset of the war. That is by no means resolved as well. So it could be the start of a peace process, although there are major obstacles to that. But as I said before, it would not be a surprise if this was just a temporary pause in the serious fighting.
The World Health Organization's Director General Tedros Ghebreyesus, he is of Ethiopian descent, and the Ethiopian government had actually written a letter to the World Health Organization, calling for him not to occupy that position again, accusing him of politicizing his position. What do we need to understand about his relationship with the country?
Well, he's Ethiopian, but he's also Tigrayan, and he's a former member of the TPLF Executive Committee. So obviously he's moved on from his political days in Ethiopia, has an incredibly important international role, but the Ethiopian government believes that he still has allegiance towards his former comrades at the TPLF, and they believe that he's using his influence at the WHO to sort of campaign against the Ethiopian government. So that's what's led to Addis Ababa taking that position.
Is there something to be said about that?
So, could you clarify the question?
Is there something to be said about that? Is there anything to their accusation, I guess, from the work that you do in analyzing the situation in Ethiopia?
I'm not. I think it's just a question of claim and counterclaim at the moment. We know, as a matter of fact, that there is a very serious humanitarian crisis inside Tigray, that the federal government has been responsible for what the UN at large calls a de facto blockade, the cutting off of services for the region. And it's also a matter of fact that Tedros at the WHO has drawn attention to these terrible conditions inside Tigray. But to what extent he's doing that because of his allegiance to a political party rather than his concern for the humanitarian situation inside Tigray, I think that's a matter of, like I say, claim and counterclaim, and not something I'm willing to try and adjudicate on.
Sure. William Davison is a senior Ethiopia analyst at the International Crisis Group. Thank you for availing yourself this afternoon.